Hello and welcome, everybody, to our H2 talk, this time discussing about the funding gap in infrastructure. The complete title of our event today is Bridging the Funding Gap, De-risking the Hydrogen Grid and Implementing the Decarbonized Gas and Hydrogen Package. My name is Yorgos Chatzimarkakis. I have the honor to be the CEO of Hydrogen Europe, and as usual, would like to guide you through this webinar. And today's webinar is important because we are in the midst of preparation of investment, but it's not so easy to bring up big investments into the hydrogen infrastructure, which is not something extraordinary for hydrogen. It's normal for infrastructure. And we want to discuss today how we can bridge that gap. If we go to the next slide, we will understand that there is a good basis for a hydrogen grid. There is the gas package, some key takeaways from that gas package that has been basically issued August last year. It establishes rules that are tailored to hydrogen transport, distribution, storage, and supply. This is good. This is excellent. It gives us a regulatory basis. There has been an option to designate a dedicated hydrogen network operator, and this will be done by the member states. But a European network of network operators has been not established yet. The process to start it has begun, and this baby not born yet will be called ENNOH. So the ENNOH, the European Network of Network Operators for Hydrogen, Christian van den Busche being the president, and from Gasgate. And this is a new body to coordinate cross-border infrastructure and planning. Also, the rules for accessing and operating networks have been defined. A progressive unbundling and third-party access has been established. I personally have been, in my previous life, policymaker, and unbundling was one of the big tasks that we had to deal with in the early 20s. And I have to say that unbundling a grid that is not existing yet is quite of an operation. But I think we found a way to have clear rules without killing the small little baby before it's even born. Then we could integrate hydrogen into the infrastructure planning, which is done both at national and EU-wide level. It's called DYNDP, the 10-year Network Development Program. And this now exists also for hydrogen. That's super important. Although there have been network decommissioning and development plans for DSOs as well. This is something we can discuss in our later life, but let's first discuss about the bigger grids. And finally, this gas package, hydrogen and gas package, gives the basis to define a low carbon hydrogen via a delegated act, latest by August 2025. We are not there yet, but honestly, we could have expected it a little bit earlier because the eyes are on decarbonization, are on clean tech. The Commission has said that the Clean Industrial Deal encompasses hydrogen big time. Where's the delegated act? Where's the definition? We have a complicated delegated act on renewable hydrogen. Yes, we know, and we know the discussion, and we are waiting because investments will not be done without knowing the rules. Next slide, please. There are some players that have started already, and Germany is a country that has shown a clear program on how to finance the gap. And here the first payment even has been done towards the hydrogen network operators from the so-called amortization account that has been made. So this amortization scheme will be explained to us later on by its inventor, by the father of this core grid and this amortization model, by Dr. Philipp Steinberg. He is one of our keynote speakers. So in March, not long time ago, this first payment of 172 million has been done. It comes from a 24 billion fund from this Amortisationskonto GmbH, which is a clear model. And this funding is foreseen for the development of the core grid or the Kernnetz in Germany, encompassing roughly 10,000 kilometers, 9,040 kilometers to be precise. So that's very good. Next slide shows us that the first concrete step has already been done. So there is a pipeline certified to supply green hydrogen to TotalEnergies, which is one of the members of Hydrogen Europe. So the whole project is run especially by RWE, also other companies that are members of Hydrogen Europe. And this is a refinery, for a refinery in Leuna. So to start with, a 25-kilometer pipeline that has been converted from natural gas to hydrogen will transport hydrogen from a 30 megawatt green hydrogen plant in Lingen, at the coast, North Sea coast of Germany, towards Leuna, which is in Saxony-Anhalt, in the refinery of TotalEnergies there. And here you can see the pictures of basically the first pressure that has been given. So this is on its way. You can see that ONTRAS, the TSO, is already involved there, another member of Hydrogen Europe. Let's go to the next slide, please, because we have also a good example from Belgium. The Fluxys hydrogen pipeline network, the plan for 25 of May of this year. This is the construction of the initial phase in Belgium that is foreseen. The pipeline is supposed to be expanded and to become part of the European hydrogen backbone. We will hear later on about this hydrogen backbone in Europe. And the yearly hydrogen transmission capacity is 30 terawatt hours by 2030. However, I have to say here that we have seen and heard that the new Belgian government, the federal government, although very friendly towards hydrogen, has put, I have seen a question mark. Let's see, it's not clear yet, but this is another big project, and it shows how the core grid in Germany will be connected to many, many other corridors, and this is one of them. And we come to the next slide. So we talk today about the costs, and the costs are enormous. They are really big. So the total infrastructure investment cost, according to a report for the European Commission issued in January this year, would be until 2040, 400 billion euro. The largest share are pipelines, 37% of the total infrastructure investments that are needed. And the highest infrastructure investment will be needed in the late 20s. So beginning of now until 2030, that's where the biggest push will come. And here the European Commission says 400 billion. Hydrogen Europe has done its own assessment, and our assessment says that the cost will even be a little bit higher, because although the pipelines are only 15% of this investment, because there's one difference, and you can see it. We are generally we are in line with the European Commission Hydrogen Infrastructure Investment Report. However, the exclusion of non-system serving electrolyzers by the report of the European Commission and the higher investment needs for storage and for import terminals are the reason why our costs are even higher. So we want to be conservative on one hand when it comes to the costs, and on the other hand, we don't want to hide the truths, and we want to explain how all this relates together. Mind you, we don't have an import strategy yet, so that is why possibly the Commission did not encompass the import terminals there, but they need to be included. Otherwise, we as an energy-hungry continent will have problems to deal with our hydrogen strategies and our decarbonization strategies in general. Next slide, please. However, you can see in this slide here on the right-hand side, there's a blank space. That's the gap in investment into hydrogen infrastructure. So on the left-hand side, you can see the estimated investments into the energy infrastructure. That's the investment that is estimated. But on the right-hand side, you can see the plans so far, the plans of investments between different infrastructures. So the different colors would mirror the different infrastructures needed. Green is electricity, and red is hydrogen. Blue is offshore generation connections. And you can see that this gap might be a big problem. And this is what we need to discuss. We also will discuss, of course, the costs that arise immediately. But this big gap in the years 2030 to come until 2040 is something we need to deal with. And that's the main topic of today's discussion. Next slide, please. We believe that there is a massive gap also between hydrogen infrastructure investment needs and electricity grids. So no doubt, electricity grids need massive investments. Nobody doubts that. However, 2 or even 3.5 infrastructures are cheaper than 1. We had a meeting with the new energy commissioner, not new anymore after nearly 1 year, but still quite fresh in his office, Dan Jørgensen, beginning of this year, where he invited associations to talk and to think about affordable energy costs. And he said he's fully aware that Europe is very much advanced when it comes to the different grids. So power, gas, hydrogen, and he included even CO2. He said the CO2 grid, that's why I say 3.5 grids. So power, gas, hydrogen, 3 plus the half is CO2, are altogether cheaper if they work with each other, if they are in a dialogue with each other, than investing into one grid. And that's something we need to discuss also today, because here you see that the massive investments into the electricity grids that are definitely needed could basically be lowered by investing into the other grids, because they can ease and help the pressure on electricity grids big time. That's not just a definition or a wish. That's what the commissioner himself said. He believes in one physical grid. That's what he said. And now we need to find the best way to bring all these grids into a positive interaction. Next slide will lead us, I think, directly to our first speaker. We have 2 keynotes today. One will be given by the deputy head of unit at DG Ener, at the relevant DG and the relevant unit of the European Commission. And we have the pleasure to welcome Anca Iulia Companu. I hope I pronounced it correctly. You are basically working on all these plans, on all these ideas, concretely also how to put into practice this hydrogen and gas package. And Anca Iulia, or Anca, I would give you directly the floor for your first keynote. You have no slides, which is preferable. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Thanks so much, Jorgo, and thanks for the very kind introduction. Indeed, I work in DG Energy. I work in the unit dealing with infrastructure and regional cooperation. So the setup of hydrogen grids is our core business, as it were. Thanks a lot for the invitation today. It honors me greatly to be able to open this nice event and to set a bit the scene from the policymaker, European policymaker perspective. So hydrogen, as Jorgo already said, will play an important role in the EU's transition to climate neutrality by 2050, as well as maintaining the competitiveness of our industrial sectors. It is vital for decarbonizing Europe's energy system, particularly in sectors that are difficult to electrify, such as steel, chemical, and fertilizer production. It will also play a key role in reducing emissions in transport applications, such as maritime and aviation. The EU has put in place obligations for the consumption of RFNBOs for industry, 42% of hydrogen consumption by 2030 and 60% by 2035. And in the transport sector, 1% of fuel supplied to the transport sector. These obligations correspond to around 3 to 6 million tons of consumption by 2030, and this requires between 30 to 60 gigawatts of electrolyzers. The Commission scenarios foresee a rapid growth of renewable hydrogen towards 2040, even going up to 35 million tons, and for 2050, 66 million tons. The 2030 obligations would require between 127 and 254 billion in investments, according to our estimates, and would make the EU the largest producer and consumer of renewable hydrogen globally in 2030, as confirmed by the International Energy Agency. At international level, additional 500 billion euros of investments are needed in establishing the diversified value chains to enable the import of 10 million tons of renewable hydrogen, including in the form of derivatives, which the EU has set as its objectives. Since Jorgo, you mentioned already the Clean Industrial Deal and the Affordable Energy Action Plan. Just to mention that the Commission outlined this plan to contribute to the decarbonization and competitiveness objective in the Clean Industrial Deal, which was published in February. It will further contribute to the hydrogen deployment. We proposed the setup of an industrial decarbonization bank, which aims at providing 100 billion euros in funding for industrial decarbonization. It will support projects that decarbonize industry using saved emissions as a metric to award contracts through competitive bidding and applying tools such as contracts for difference. EU Invest will also be revamped, and several additional guarantee and lending systems will be developed with the EIB to de-risk investments related to clean tech, manufacturing, and industrial decarbonization. On the hydrogen and gases package, including the hydrogen bank, although the Clean Industrial Deal will substantially contribute to the hydrogen ramp-up, on the regulatory side, most provisions have already been in place for more than a year with the package that was approved last year, which enables legal certainty and long-term visibility that are required for attracting much-needed investments into the hydrogen value chain. And Jorgo, you referred extensively to the package, so I will be short on this one. I will just mention the European Hydrogen Bank, which was a new initiative that to boost investments and connect the future European and international supply of renewable hydrogen with our demand objective. The second auction has results that are expected now in May, with further 1.2 million euros to be dispersed to the most cost-effective production of renewable hydrogen in the EU. This year's Innovation Fund call will also include a third call under the Hydrogen Bank, with details to be made available later in the year. However, the budget of the EU Innovation Fund is limited, and the investment challenge is big, as also you pointed out. And this is why we encourage member states to use national funds for hydrogen through the auction and service scheme. As an example, Spain, Lithuania, and Austria will commit up to 836 million to projects in their countries under the European Hydrogen Bank's second auction. Europe will need both locally produced and important renewable and low-carbon hydrogen. On the international side of the hydrogen bank, it is important that member states combine their resources to a Team Europe approach, and this would support renewable hydrogen imports from partner countries with high renewable energy potential. On this, the Commission is organizing workshops with member states to discuss elements regarding the design and the criteria on an import auction under the European Hydrogen Bank. Transparency and coordination will remain the key elements to hydrogen market development. On the pilot hydrogen mechanism, you might be already aware that the Commission will roll out this hydrogen mechanism under the Hydrogen Bank to connect off-takers and suppliers and thereby facilitate demand aggregation. The hydrogen mechanism is not limited to hydrogen, but will also cover derivatives such as ammonia, methanol, and FSAFs, both renewable and low carbon. And it will provide three main services: connecting future demand and supply of hydrogen and derivatives, collecting interest in infrastructure, and liaising market participants with financial stakeholders. The registration of participants to the hydrogen mechanism will start now in June, and the mechanism will go live in September this year. So this is something to watch and very interesting in terms of developing. And last but not least, because this is my core topic, the TENI regulation with the upcoming grid package. So you know that one of the cornerstones for hydrogen infrastructure is the TENI regulation, which covers electrolyzers, hydrogen pipelines, storages, and import terminals. 65 hydrogen projects are already part of the first PCI PMI list. And 21 of them have already received this year support from the Connecting Europe facility for studies in amount of 250 million, which is already impressive, as this is the first union list where we have hydrogen projects. Additionally, the Commission already cleared 39 billion in state aid for hydrogen projects, including important projects of common European interest, some of which are also on our union list of PCIs and PMIs. However, as Jorgo already mentioned, despite the enabling framework, there are several persisting challenges which are slowing down the pipeline of hydrogen projects. Delays in offtake agreements and production FIDs affect the commercial viability assessments of infrastructure due to the lack of binding capacity bookings. And I know towards the end of the discussion today, we will touch upon the grids package. So I will keep my mentions of the grids package for that moment. But I look forward to the fructuous discussions in your event. Thanks a lot.
Many thanks, Anka. Mulțumesc. Very, very helpful to get also a picture of the plenty activities that are done on EU level. And the figures you mentioned, it's, by the way, 1.2 billion, the second call. So it's of the Hydrogen Bank. It's really substantial. Shows that the activity of the EU is great. However, you kept your main topic, so how to finance the infrastructure for the end and for the discussion, and rightly so. So we will come later back to it. I would now like to look into a country that has already passed a law about their own core grid. I think I showed in the slide before the 10,000 kilometers that will be made a hydrogen grid all over Germany, and that's the country, Germany. And I welcome very much Dr. Philipp Steinberg, who is Director General on Economic Stabilization, Energy Security, Gas, Hydrogen Infrastructure in the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Protection. Philipp was also extremely actively involved into replacing Russian gas when we had this war situation with Ukraine, and Nord Stream was cut, and Philipp was the one making Germany somehow survive. He had short I think, and I remember. And he's also the inspiring personality when it comes to this core grid and its financing. He doesn't have a new minister yet, because yesterday we heard that the possible new minister who was discussed, Carsten Linnemann, the second gen of the Christian Democratic Party in Germany, said, "No, I'm not running." So we don't know. Maybe you know, Philip, already who will be your next minister, but it doesn't matter 100%. It matters, of course, always who's the minister, but it is enshrined in the coalition agreement that the core grid will happen. And of course, once you build up a core grid, you need a financing and you need to bridge the gap. And this is exactly where you step in and tell us how, because you will stay in that government, how you will do this. And it's an honor to have you here, Philip. I would like to invite you for your contribution. And for those asking for slides, we will have some slides. We had already some slides, but this here is also a hydrogen talk. We want to talk and not kill ourselves with figures. Philip, you have.
Thank you so much, Jorgo, and I can even promise you some slides. I've prepared some slides, and but not too many. I won't bore you too much, but I think talking about core grids, it's always nice to have a visualization. And yeah, thanks Jorgo for having me and for initiating this conversation. I think Anka Julia has already presented like a broad picture, quite a few aspects. Indeed, I try to concentrate on one possibility to finance it. I mean, obviously on the German core grid, but I'll make some comments on the European infrastructure and the necessity of a coordinated European approach. And also, I'm always calling for leadership of the Commission, and I think the Commission is increasingly listening to it. So. Without, I don't want to bore you too much, but I show you some slides. I mean, to start with, and Anka Julia has already mentioned it, of course, the question of offtake. I mean, this is of course crucial, and for everything at the end of the day, we need offtake. If we don't have offtake, the whole value chain breaks down. You may know that in Germany, according to our import strategy, we have released last summer. And we have an offtake of up to 700 terawatts. That is more than 20 million tons of hydrogen. And obviously, you know the debates. Where do we need hydrogen? In which sectors? Also, obviously, we have a cost issue. Costs don't come down as quickly as we hope them to come down. We have therefore we are in the process of renegotiating our contracts for different steel producers. So 700 terawatt is certainly at the higher end. Maybe we have to do an update and lower those figures somewhat. Still, I mean, I think in a way it's a no-brainer that we need, of course, low carbon gases, especially hydrogen, in order to decarbonize our economy, to meet the climate targets, of course. We need to electrify everything that's possible. We need to reap efficiencies, but we need molecules as well, green molecules or low carbon molecules to be more precise. And I'm personally very happy, and I can read this in the new German coalition treaty as well, that this combat between electrons and molecules, or the groups, or the all electrical group and the all molecular group have somewhat, in a way, I think they are reconciled, because now we have agreed we need everything. So basically, I mean, this is quite impressive, even if we possibly revise it a little bit down. Obviously, this is value chain. You know that, I will not go into that of the hydrogen strategy, and obviously the value chain we are trying to establish, obviously within the European contract, and we are very happy that the European Commission, of course, with all the initiatives, the regulatory framework conditions is helping here a great deal. Even though, I mean, I cannot spare this comment, obviously. And this is enshrined in the new German coalition treaty as well. We need to simplify the regulatory framework conditions really a lot. We need to really make sure that now we get low carbon hydrogen, regardless of the color. and therefore we need to really review some of the criteria, or that additionality and hourly matching are really issues we need to look in, and the new German government will push even harder to make it really to deregulate as much as possible, because we need an easy and stable regulatory framework conditions. So now I'm approaching. I'm always at the core network. Don't despair. So basically, obviously, we need infrastructure in order to solve the famous chicken and egg problem. I think in most lectures you've already heard about that. Industry tells us that we cannot take FIDs if we are not sure that the infrastructure is there. So basically, we of course thought, how can we solve this? We thought of creating a national hydrogen network company, but this wasn't met with a lot of enthusiasm by most of the political parties and the TSOs neither. So we thought, okay, what can we do in order to actually connect all the centers and provide this necessary infrastructure? And you can see here, this is basically the hydrogen core network as it is planned right now, more or less.
Philip, we can't see the slide. Can you move to the slide you want to show? Because at the moment the initial slide is you need to move the slide, and there are also issues with your microphone. So we hear some.
That is, of course.
We can hear you, but it is interrupted sometimes. So it's knackt. And that's.
This is actually our system doesn't like Zoom. That's a little bit.
Now it's better. Now it's better. Maybe it's with the slides. So without slides, it seems to be better.
I'll do it without slides, then maybe it's better, and I try to visualize it orally as much as possible. So basically, I mean, the hydrogen core network, the idea obviously is to connect the industrial centers, to connect to integrate it into the European hydrogen core network, and to obviously provide the backbone, as it's called. And it could be as long as 9,000 kilometers in 2032, basically, and that is of course pretty ambitious. As Jorgo, you have already outlined, the cost of course are substantive. We think it's around 20 billion euros, the cost of this 9,000 kilometer long hydrogen core network. But if you compare it, of course, with electricity grids, then it's relatively cheap. I mean, and that's really one of the advantages of molecules that is sometimes overlooked. It is really relatively cheap to transport. And but it's quite remarkable, actually. I mean, we have tried to future-proof it, the network. As I've outlined, I mean, what our offtake projection in 2045 is. Our offtake projection in 2030 is between 90 and 130 terawatt hours of hydrogen, and we have basically twice as much capacity in the hydrogen core network, 287 terawatts. So that's really, I mean, to make it really future-proof. And obviously, the volume is not decisive. You need, of course, to have the right geographic capacity, but it shows you that it's really like it is pretty future-proof. What is important, of course, is that we are saying, and this is really the core idea of the core network, is if there is demand, there will be the core network, and I talk about the financing mechanism in a moment. And so it's basically not we don't have to do the calculation and say, okay, it will be there will be a business case for it. But we have really said, if there's demand, then we will then the hydrogen core network will be constructed. It's about 60% repurposed pipelines and 40% newly built pipelines. So basically, that explains why it's relatively cheap. Also, we repurpose quite a lot of the core network with this capacity of 87 gigawatts and a total volume of 287 terawatts. And obviously, we are progressively rolling it out till 2032, or if the rollout takes more time, because the hydrogen ramp up takes more time, then we have a possibility to stretch it to 2037 as well. This depends really on the market circumstances, but certainly the hydrogen core network will not be the bottleneck. On financing, I mean, this is in a way, I mean, it's not rocket science. This amortization account, it's a temporal cost allocation mechanism idea is, but it's something which is helps to save taxpayers' money, because it's a privately financed private mechanism. I try to just, can you see this slide I'm showing you now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, then because it's a bit tricky maybe. So the idea is pretty simple of the financing mechanism and intertemporal cost allocation. We have defined a period, a long amortization period until 2055. This is really quite a long time. And then the idea is, in the beginning, obviously there will be few users. So basically, it would be really very costly to have cost covering ramp up fee. So basically, we cap the tariffs at the beginning, and we hope to recover it at the end when there are more users. Hydrogen is cheaper, and so basically we just we calculate the average amount, the average ramp up fee, and that means the revenue shortfalls in the beginning will be collected in what we call this amortization account. So basically, what you can see here at the very lower end of the slide is like a sample calculation of how the amortization account will look like. You can see it builds up. So basically, here it's 10,000, but that's based on and this is very important. That's based on a tariff of €13.50 per kilowatt hour. Per year. So that means this, I don't know if everybody understands. So basically, that is the fee somebody has to pay in order to have guaranteed delivery of this quantity of hydrogen per year. The Federal Network Agency right now is actually having a consultation on the ramp up fee, so it will be probably higher. Now we are talking about 25 euros per kilowatt hour per year, but it's rather at the higher end, because of course we want to prevent too high too costly ramp up fees. Still, I mean, if you look at the commodity costs, then it's still below 10% of the commodity cost. If you take and this rather at the lower end, a hydrogen cost of 150 euros per megawatt hour, which would be something like 4 euros, a bit less than 4 euros per kilogram. And so the hope is, or the idea is that basically this is all this ramp up fee is a private fee. It is just basically supported through this amortization account and provided by the federal the KfW, our state bank, but it will be paid back at the end, and the whole thing is backed up by a state guarantee. So in case everything fails, the ramp up fails, then the state steps in the guarantee, but a Selbstbehalt, which is retention, basically a retention of 24%. That was a huge debate. That's the de-risking exercise we are doing. It was a huge debate if the 24% is too much or too little. We believe it's fair that in order to prevent moral hazard. But obviously, this is open debate. The TSOs believe it's too high, but this is always the question if you talk about the question of de-risking. And we start with what we call an integrated hydrogen and gas network planning next year. So basically, the 9,000 kilometer core network will be or can be, of course, modified. It can be increased in size, also in certain areas, maybe decreased in size. So there is a flexible mechanism, flexibility built in. And the last slide, and then I'm through, is obviously we will integrate it into the European hydrogen core network system. And this is really important, that here you can see that those are the corridors: North Sea corridor, Southwest Europe, North Africa corridor, and the Baltic and Nordic region. So basically, it goes around Germany. We will not really realize all those corridors. That would be too much. But we are exploring all of those, and of course here, and this is really important. Also, what Anka-Julia said, we need European financing mechanisms. Connect Europe facility is good, but we might need more, and we have entered in discussion with other member states, but also with the Commission on de-risking instruments. We believe that intertemporal cost allocation mechanisms could be one way to also de-risk European pipeline infrastructure. And of course, there are different ways how to do this, with offtake guarantees, with a state guarantee, with a European facility. We really need to go into this discussion, because of course it's good if national and if member states start with ideas like that, but ultimately we need this to be a European exercise. Therefore, Jorgo, it's so important that you and Hydrogen Europe is really bringing us together and bringing all the ideas together. And of course, that the Commission is really, I think, increasingly understanding how important infrastructure is, and develops leadership in this area. Thank you very much.
Many thanks. Vielen Dank. That was quite impressive. Also to see that the amortization model is not rocket science. This is very good. I have, Philip, a question here in the chat directly from Dieter Brückner to you, which is very simple, might not be answerable immediately. How many offtake contracts have been signed by industry to ensure load on the German core network in 2030? There are some, but are you retrieving such data already? Do you have a record on this? Maybe we can answer this question already.
Yes, of course. I mean, as I said in the very beginning, this is really the $5,000 question. I mean, where everything starts and begins. And in order to realize the value chain, the corridors, and ultimately fill the core network, of course, we need our offtake, and basically our anchor customers are the steel industry. It's Salzgitter, it's ThyssenKrupp, it's the Saarstahl, where we have already handed out support, of course, money, and now we are actually fine tuning that and updating that. So we are in the process of doing that. Then of course we are talking, and this is open now, and because of the coalition treaty, if there are hydrogen ready power plants, this is of course something we would need actually for this dimensioned core network. If there's no hydrogen power plants, then we will certainly decrease it in size. You know that the new German government wants to build 20 gigawatts of gas fired power plants, which is very ambitious, because I mean that would mean 40 new gas plants, and obviously the Commission has to clear it under state aid rules. So we have to see what comes out. Friedrich Merz wants CCS, of course, gas power plants with CCS, but obviously we have to see what comes out. All the studies I now show that actually at least blue hydrogen powered power plants are cheaper than CCS gas power plants. So we see what the jury is out there. And then of course we have the chemistry and refinery business. There are some offtake agreements have been concluded as well. But it's true, it's not huge amount. We are really working on that, and we need to see more offtake agreements being concluded. But we are confident that there will be more, because now the support money and the regulatory framework is getting in place.
Philip, your talk triggers lots of questions here in the chat. Maybe you can have a look yourself, because you will later on have the possibility to take the floor and to answer them. They are very, very interesting, I have to say. One of which is whether derivatives from hydrogen can also use the same financing mechanisms. No need to answer right now, but it's extremely interesting what we have here in the chat. Maybe you might have a look because it's really interesting. We now would come to our panel and come back to Anka and to Philip later on. And on our panel, we have Saara Kärki, the chairwoman of the European Hydrogen Backbone, and the Senior Vice President of Hydrogen Development at Gasgrid Finland, Oy, and Chief Operating Officer is Gasgrid Vetiverkot Oy. So that's very interesting. Then we have Bert van der Toorn. He's a Senior Investment Officer and works for the European Investment Bank, the biggest investment bank in the world. And he works on clean tech equity and growth capital in this division. Then it's a pleasure to welcome Uwe Weichenhain. He's a senior partner for energy and infrastructure at Roland Berger. And last but not least, Uffe Winter. He is managing director for the energy transition funds in the investment team of the Copenhagen Infrastructure Partner, CIP, a very, very important player in the hydrogen world, CIP. But I would love to start with Saara Kärki, terve. Welcome to happy to have you here. You are responsible for the development of the hydrogen business at Gasgrid. And also you have an extensive experience in the energy market from technology and business development in the energy sector. The gas and hydrogen package is featured by the European Hydrogen Backbone implementation roadmap. Public support as catalyst for hydrogen infrastructure was published in April 24, so last year. And my question to you is, what is the reality today of creating a new market and infrastructure beyond what is provided for in this gas and hydrogen package? And maybe you also can answer the question, what is the vision of the European Backbone Initiative in that regard? And what role does regulation play for you? Saara, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Jorgo, for the kind invitation from Hydrogen Europe to join this important event. And actually, quite a lot of the topics that were already discussed in the previous keynote speeches and the introductory talk laid out by Jorgo, you already. But before going into the details of the questions that you raised, a couple of words on the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative. So we are an initiative formed by about 30 transmission system operator companies, infrastructure companies, developing hydrogen projects in Europe. We are today also part of the Gas Infrastructure Europe Association and developing our work within that umbrella. But the EHB, so European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative, was created by companies sharing a vision of creating a pan-European hydrogen infrastructure and market to support the decarbonization of Europe. That said, I think we have a lot of or a few other topics that are important when discussing about hydrogen today, and those being Europe's strategic autonomy, energy resilience and European competitiveness, which we believe from the European Hydrogen Backbone Initiative that actually hydrogen infrastructure and connecting infrastructure in Europe can actually very well support. And why is that? We believe that enables actually production of hydrogen where it is cheapest, enables build out of renewable energy and a diversification of energy supply. And of course, as mentioned already, efficient energy transport and optimizing the investments to the energy system across these different vectors and avoiding over investments to our energy system. And to your question on the gas package and how we see the regulation, EHB initiative has always been a more strategic and analytical or had an analytical focus. So we are not a detailed regulatory expert group, but more a strategic group looking at how can we support Europe in its future-proofing its infrastructure and energy system. And based on our analysis, we see that the gas package and hydrogen package gives a good sort of high-level rules and framework for developing the hydrogen infrastructure and market, but there are still measures that need acceleration for the future hydrogen transmission network operators to take forward their project proactively. And overall, I think that the mandates, even though that the key sectors have been also raised in discussions today, they are still relatively low to ensure that investments would happen from the commercial perspective, for example, from the private investor point of view. And a key point is that we are designing the pipelines to meet the anticipatory or the future demand, transport demand. The pipelines are built with lifetimes from 50 to 60 years. It remains to be seen what are the lifetimes for hydrogen pipelines still, but that is actually the design assumption. So we can't, or we shouldn't, design our pipelines to meet the demand in 2030 or even 2040, but we should look on the longer term approach. And that, I think, is the key challenge, that if you think about the commitments, long-term capacity reservations or capacity bookings to meet the long-term dimensioning of those pipelines. So that is the missing link. So the projects are not bankable as of today, or many of them. And that's why we need different measures to de-risk the investments. The German model, I think, is a very good one, taking initiative on this aspect. But then in addition to that, I think we need also other tools to de-risk the investments. And those could be the DEVEX support or CapEx support. I think CEF funding plays a crucial role to support the financing of these key projects of common interest, and that's basically where we are. So we need different tools in our toolbox going forward, including perhaps the ITCA or similar. Thank you.
Kiitos paljon. Thanks very much indeed. I think it's very good to have an understanding of what the Backbone Initiative is doing. There is in the chat a question about Ireland, very important one, because Ireland is suffering heavily from data centers that are consuming their energy, and they would love to have a hydrogen backup, but also they would like to be connected. Maybe you can have a look, Sarah, at that Irish question, and we come back to it later on. I would like to welcome now Uwe Weichenhain, who is, as I said, senior partner and at Roland Berger for energy infrastructure. He has a cross-discipline background, and for many, many years he is looking into hydrogen infrastructures. And I would like to understand why it is so different to deal with hydrogen infrastructure, and why is it harder to fund than traditional gas networks. Does the EU hydrogen and decarbonized gas package provide sufficient regulatory foundation? And before we start, in the chat, there is a nice segue to this question, or to this point raised by Victor Science, who mentions the figures. So the German investment into core grid is 20 billion, as Philip also just said. The corresponding investment into electricity is 320 billion. So it's only 300 billion more, although it would serve a similar purpose. Why on earth is it so difficult to fund then hydrogen projects? Uwe, you are the expert here. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Jorgo, for the introduction, and thank you for the question. And indeed, it's the classic chicken and egg problem we are confronting here. So hydrogen requires, to a good part, new dedicated pipeline storage and import terminals. And one other question we already had in the chat, it's important to note, of course, that this goes beyond pipelines here. Yeah, so if you look at the hydrogen project landscape globally, in fact, most of the gigawatt scale export projects out there in the development targeting the European market will produce hydrogen derivatives, ammonia or methanol, rather than pure hydrogen. Well, and Jorgo, you spoke earlier about the investment need, several hundred billion euros, depending who you ask, for hydrogen and derivative infrastructure. Hence, it's costly, maybe not short term, but ultimately it's very costly. And looking at what is funded out there for the time being, it's really only a very small fraction of it. It's single digit. Anka mentioned a couple of examples of EU funding earlier in her speech. We were hearing about millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, but not in the order of magnitude of billions. And of course, the major issue we are confronted here with is immature demand. Unlike gas infrastructure, we don't have an established market. We don't have guaranteed offtake over long periods of time, making returns on investments highly uncertain. And that's a classic chicken and egg, and that's what needs to be overcome. Philipp said earlier in his introduction of the German core network, well, if there is the demand, then we will build the core network if there is demand. Yeah. So, and I think demand needs to be proven. That's the core aspect of it. And here we need to be realistic, looking at what's happening in the market. We heard about the anchor customers of the German grid earlier. So the steel makers, many of the projects are in the making, of course, with state subsidies. But at the same time, we also see delays there when it comes to CCG, hydrogen-ready CCGTs. That's also very much in the making on the regulatory perspective. Hence, of course, the funding need is massive, but I think we also need to look at this with a clear view on what is required in the very short run. On your slide, Jorgo, earlier, until 2030, and what is required afterwards. Well, how to bridge the funding gap? Well, I think we have a natural market participant to be in charge for hydrogen infrastructure. The gas TSOs from the work we do in the industry are in principle willing to invest in hydrogen infrastructure. It's also a very sensible strategic move from my perspective. Looking at the future of natural gas deployment towards 2050 is a very long-term industry ultimately. But gas TSOs also see this as a question of survival. Hence, there is principal willingness to invest in a hydrogen grid. There's absolutely no doubt about it. We just need to come up with the demand uncertainty, and of course, we need to overcome the low initial utilization. And if you ask me, Jorgo, the only actor that can effectively bridge that gap now in the very early stages of the market is indeed the state. I see no private market actor who can take that role. Hence, I do believe that the German approach that Philipp introduced earlier, it can indeed be a blueprint for the rollout across Europe. Then you also asked specifically how the hydrogen and gas package can contribute here. I mean, it's a starting point. Yeah, it's a very starting point in my view, since it defines the hydrogen types and it sets up integrated network planning, which is important, especially in the cross-border context. But of course, the package falls short when it comes to a very important aspect of the current market environment, which is, well, provisions for import terminals and the derivatives like ammonia and methanol. And then, of course, also the tariff model storage framework, etc., needs to be developed. It's a natural, of course, development. It takes time. But the thing is, of course, we don't have much time. Yeah, for the gas grid, it took 20, 30, 40 years to develop an integrated European grid. And for the hydrogen grid, unfortunately, we don't have that time.
That's exactly the problem, that pressure is very high, expectation is very, very high. And of course, hydrogen is also just a molecule. Huh? It's close to magic, but it's not magic. We will listen from state-close institutions like the EIB later on, but let's go first to the private investors. Let's hear from the private investors, because you said, Uwe, that it's very difficult for them. But Uffe is here, and Uffe represents CIP, which is a fund management company focused on energy infrastructure, including offshore wind, onshore wind, solar PV, biomass, and very much so also hydrogen. CIP manages 12 funds that and has to date raised approximately 31 billion. Wow, that's massive. The question to you, Uffe, what type of new investment opportunities will emerge from the implementation of the gas package, if any? And can you give any point of view from an investor perspective? What would attract you even more, or what would block you from investing? Uffe, happy to have you.
And thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here. I think it's an extremely good question, and I think the gas package is a very, very important move. It's something that we need, and we need it as fast as we can get it, obviously. I think what could currently sort of resolve the chicken and the egg issue that we have heard mentioned a couple of times before already, is that we are trying to create a new market here. Right now, hydrogen in Europe consists of mostly co-located hydrogen production and consumption facilities, and therefore there is no market, because what defines a market is that multiple producers and multiple off-takers can meet each other in a marketplace, and you can trade and you can determine a price. Right now, it's island-based production consumption pairs where price is not really visible, and even if it were, you wouldn't be able to go to the other guys and say, I will buy from you, because you wouldn't be able to transport the hydrogen to another location. So we really, really need that market to happen. And regulation is obviously a key part of market making, but the physical assets that allows you to actually take your product to the customer is so, so important. So therefore, creation of a market, I think, will take us to where we see more established markets like the power market. So therefore, I think that's incredibly important, and you will unlock a lot of investment appetite, because many projects become more bankable. As a hydrogen developer, we know that when we engage with a hydrogen off-taker, it undergoes a lot of scrutiny. Will that off-taker be here for the long run? Can we account on that revenue stream coming into the project? And if not, what are the alternatives? And if you're co-located, you actually don't have too many alternatives, because if one leg falls off, the other leg stands alone, and you sort of need somewhere else to go with your product. And as soon as you can do that, you actually de-risk the market tremendously. And I think the word de-risking is as important as closing the cost gap, because I think many projects will be able to find off-takers who are sort of willing to pay the cost that it requires, but then you have the de-risking problem, is that the right partner for your project. So I think the gas package, with the infrastructure that it creates and the market that it will eventually create, will take a lot of pressure off the word de-risking, because the market is excellent in de-risking, really. And we just need to really get to that. And until we get to that, we need to be creative and find ways to sort of overcome the initial period where The market cannot de-risk us, but where we definitely need de-risking still. So get that physical market up and running as soon as possible, then I think a lot of load will come off regulators and governments, and like we see in the power market.
Many thanks, Tusen Tak. I will come back to you, Uffe, in a second with a concrete question that combines this. The expectation of a steel producer in Germany, mentioned already earlier on by Philip, ThyssenKrupp, was heavily destroyed when Denmark decided to postpone basically the connection of Denmark and some of your projects probably that could deliver hydrogen for that steel company. But I leave it for a next round. And there is another issue because in Kassel in May, there will be a big plant that will produce e-methanol, and data centers are extremely interested in that. That might be another way out, but I'll come back to you after we listen to Bert, because Bert van der Toorn is basically, if you wish, the public strong hand that could help. We heard from Philip earlier on that KfW in Germany, the public bank, is playing quite a role in the amortization scheme. Is this something that you, Bert, could look into with the EIB? I mean, you have a long-lasting experience with ING Bank and also with the EBRD, a very, very agile public bank. What are the main funding schemes the EIB offers today to enable the development of hydrogen infrastructure, and how can they complement what the gas and hydrogen package provides for it in that area right now? Bert, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, currently I'm sitting on the hydrogen committee at the EIB, so we look at various issues and proposals, and as such, of course, we look at our normal products that we have on the table, and we also try to see how otherwise we can enhance investment, because quite clearly we are keen to support these initiatives, and we do also see the chicken and egg situation. So we are, of course, talking to the Commission about potential support schemes. We are talking in Germany in respect of H2 Global, and trying to see how we can support. I think the amortization scheme is quite laudable, as they say, because it provides a clear solution. And on the package, quite clearly, this is necessary. You need a regulatory framework. You need all kinds of things to be organized, of course, at the member state level. So there's still some steps to be taken before we all know what we are having to chew on. So for the time being, our support for the infrastructure in hydrogen is like our support for infrastructure in other sectors, where basically you can see us support the TSOs themselves. And we also support particular projects. Like in the past, we financed, together with commercial entities, we financed TAP when we were still allowed to do gas. And of course, we see similar potential in the future, especially with support from entities like H2 Global for the production and the offtake that would then support a ship or pay kind of transaction where the infrastructure can be supported from the private sector. Now, does that mean we have a solution now for the chicken and egg situation? No, we do not. But it does mean that we have some products on the shelf that we could utilize depending on the support schemes that we can work with. So the package is fundamental, but it's of course not the end of it. We need to, at the end of the day, either see support from member states for the particular infrastructure themselves with TSOs, or we have to see a truly interconnected project type financing, which is like TAP, where you have a ship and pay contract with entities that have creditworthy status for long enough. Yeah, and of course with infrastructure, long enough is long. So even 10 years is relatively short. and 1 year offtake guarantees won't be good enough to get a financing going. Does this answer your question? I cannot say, but it's clearly something we try to focus on together with the Commission, together with the German entities, and quite open to try to find structures that work without completely jeopardizing our AAA status, which the member states want us to keep.
I can fully understand that, and we are very proud of our EIB. We have an MOU, by the way, with as Hydrogen Europe with the EIB, and happy to work together. No, it answers the question, and you alluded to H2 Global. I will address this H2 Global idea. It has been also raised in questions and answers to both to Uwe and later on to Philip, who can also comment on many things. Before I ask Uwe about H2 Global, there are some technical issues raised in the chat. Happy to answer this also in written. We will do that with our experts, especially on the embrittlement of hydrogen infrastructure and also on risks and dangers that we are happy to answer. Uwe, H2 Global, is this the right idea and the right scheme in order to bridge this risk gap that you also mentioned? So risk is the most important thing, and H2 Global also enshrined in the coalition agreement of the new German government. I think it was important what Philip said, that the new German government is fully committed to hydrogen. This is extremely important because it's one of the biggest pull markets. And as we know, H2 Global is now definitely mentioned. Is this the right tool? Is it managed in the right way, or would you see also opportunities to explore the opportunities of H2 Global in de-risking and hence bridging the gap to investment into infrastructure? Uwe.
I think H2 Global is a great tool, also because it has led to short-term results. Yeah, and this is important. It's about timing here, and we need short-term contracts and short-term implementation of projects. And H2 Global is quite effective when it comes to that. The issue is scale. Yeah, looking at the funding available under H2 Global for a developer of a several hundred megawatt or gigawatt project, it's ultimately the cherry on the cake, but you cannot reach bankability based on the H2 Global auction. Hence, it can contribute to de-risking, but it's not effective in providing a de-risking mechanism for a full project. Nevertheless, I mean, it's quite effective, and we have seen first international auctions that have succeeded. Others have not. That's also part of the story. But in principle, I do believe that in this very immature phase of the market, it's an effective tool. And in fact, if you look at what the European Commission is doing on EU level under the Hydrogen Bank, which is not a bank, but a mechanism that is derived from H2 Global, if you will, has picked up this topic and now rules it out. The ultimate question is how much funds are available under this mechanism, because ultimately we are talking about OPEX funding for a long period of time, 10 years. Hence, depending on the market development on the other end. So if the state or the EU needs to basically sell on that hydrogen or hydrogen derivative it bought from the market under certain conditions to clients, it can, of course, can get very, very costly for the state, hence the taxpayers. And that's the ultimate issue. I think the tool itself, the mechanism, has provided to be effective.
Excellent. Thank you. Before I turn to Philip to also comment on several other points, just a point of information. We are currently preparing a bigger tender on eSAF for aviation with H2 Global and with some member states plus Switzerland. All together, there will be, if everything goes well, 1 billion in the pot for a tender on ESAF. That's very concrete. It will be launched quite soon. And we are very, very happy to support this mechanism after a week where the IMO, the International Maritime Organization, also took some basic decisions, some pre-decisions in order to go into that direction. So this is all important in order to de-risk, because there will be basically bigger mechanisms like maritime, like aviation fuels, that will go into that direction. So that brings me to Philip, who might hopefully underpin the importance of H2 Global and the existence of H2 Global, knowing things from inside the ministry. And would you mind to comment on the different issues? I would ask Anka in the end to comment basically also from the point of view of the European Commission, and also Bert before that. But having had a look at the questions that also were directed to you, what's your comment at this place?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed also for the other interventions. I think very helpful indeed. I'll try to address some of the questions in the chat as well. I mean, obviously, offtake is crucial once again, and in the chat there were a couple of questions on that, how to actually support more offtake. How about other potential off-takers and so on? About the big players won't fix the deal. That's true. Therefore, I mean, obviously there's sticks and carrots in the game as always, and we need, of course, carrots. And we have talked about H2 Global, indeed very important. We are actually developing it further. We want to establish what we call a European window as well, in order to support also pipeline infrastructure, especially for the southern corridor, which aims to bring green hydrogen from Northern Africa through Italy and Austria into Germany, but also, of course, offtake providing offtake for Italy and Austria. So this is important, but also, of course, carbon contracts for difference. Still, I mean, we are rolling out now the second tender of carbon contracts for different, with a different layout, more, if I may call it, more hydrogen friendly. The first round wasn't successful in all regards. So basically, this is really very double-digit billion envelope, and so we are rolling that out. Of course, we have the IPCEI funding, which is used for the steel projects, amongst the other things. And we have, of course, like the de-risking instruments of the core network. We are also actually launching a consultation on a white paper, as we call it, on storage, hydrogen storage, which is a topic actually, Jorgo, we should maybe devote a little bit more attention to. And I know that the debate is starting on the European level as well. So basically, yes, offtake. There's a number of instruments we are rolling out. I may say, of course, it would help. Let's frame it like that. If we have a CO2 price actually, which helps decarbonization efforts, because obviously, if you have a high CO2 price, then obviously decarbonization makes more sense economically. And of course, we need to then develop our carbon border adjustment mechanisms further, which is probably not such an easy deal with the new Trump administration in place. But we should still go for it. On e-methane and ammonia and all that, the question, obviously, this is a big debate. In general, I mean, e-methane, of course, is a complex production process, as you all know. First, you have to produce green hydrogen. You have to somehow get the CO2. You have then to do the Sabatier process in order to arrive at e-methane. That is a lot of process steps, which are quite costly in terms of efficiency. If you integrate it into a system with a power plant and you use the exhaustion heat, then actually it can be very efficient. And of course, if you integrate it then into your system, then of course it can be extremely helpful for decarbonization. So yes, of course it can play a part. We have to see how big the part will be. And of course, we are debating, you all know that probably, of course, in Germany now, different further offtake mechanisms, like what we call the green gas quota, which is basically different options, of course, but like a compulsory percentage of green gases for midstreamers. That will probably be implemented. We will develop lead markets, so there will be more offtake instruments, and they will be probably, I mean, you have to see the different options, and this is of course the new German government which has to decide it, but they will be open also for other green molecules like e-methane and ammonia, and of course biomethane as well. There was a question on interoperability with Great Britain. Actually, I cannot say a lot. I travel to Great Britain next week, and we are talking about that as well. But we don't really know what the new British government really is all about. So we have to see on hydrogen. We have to see what they do. What would I recommend for Belgium and the Netherlands? I mean, I'm not saying that our approach is, the only one you can do. I mean, I think we need to de-risk offtake somewhat. I mean, this has been made clear by the colleagues here as well. But that can be done with different ways. You can just have state guarantees, offtake guarantees. There are different ways. I mean, what we did, of course, the nice thing about it is it's not public money, it's just a guarantee, and we hope that's a private funded finance mechanism which helps. So I hope, Yorgos, I answered most of the questions, the technical questions here on corrosion and so on. I would leave that to you.
We do that in written. Thanks very much for answering these questions. Before I come to Sarah, then Bert, and then finally Anka, Uffe, my question to you, how you assess this Danish-German thing, and of course, whether you see any hope for you to de-risk via the Kassel project data centers based on clean or green, in this case even green hydrogen, well, helped by a derivative to make it storable. Your comment would be welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Danish issue with the hydrogen pipeline is a super example of what we need to solve for. I think in Denmark, the government came to realize that the ambitious build out of renewable electricity goes hand in hand with hydrogen infrastructure. We've said it so many times. You introduced it, 3.5 types of infrastructure is cheaper than one. So we need to see that in isolation, hydrogen pipelines are risky and costly, but we need to reallocate the value from the electricity side to the hydrogen side, because we need to see it as one. And I think it came very clear in Denmark because there were no bids received for the offshore wind projects that were tendered. And I think the missing hydrogen infrastructure was simply a part of that, because you need to add more electricity demand in order to build out on such a scale. So let's view this as a sort of a micro example, or an example of what could happen if we don't think across different technologies here. Another aspect that I want to comment on in Denmark was that initially the TSO was requesting each project to commit a very large capacity commitment in order to de-risk the hydrogen pipeline. So asking for, let's say, an 800 megawatt commitment, which no single project could do on its own, because they were not that large, right? So it means that every project was relying on the colleagues also doing it and coming together, and that just introduces a massive risk that you cannot take an FID unless your neighbor or your competitor also takes an FID, but you cannot coordinate those things. So I think eventually the right balance was found in Denmark, where we say the TSO is committed to building the pipeline, and the projects can commit the TSO. So it's sort of a counter commitment. If a project books capacity, then the TSO has to build. And this is what we are looking for. It is not just asking someone else to commit, but also counter commit. So that when you see that offtake commitment and that capacity booking commitment is actually available, then you also need to commit to building the pipeline. Otherwise, a hydrogen producer will see off-takers walking away if you cannot guarantee that you will eventually be able to send the product to where the off-taker is. So two things, right? Yes, hydrogen goes together with power. We need to think across, and we need to commit each other mutually, and then actually get the project done. We cannot all ask for complete de-risking in that sense that we'll then be waiting for each other. Yeah, let me leave it here.
Many thanks. Tusen Tag. Sarah, you have heard all these comments also about the backbone. So you have seen the Irish request. What's your comment on the discussion right now? How can we accelerate? And what do we expect from EIB and European Commission? That's my question to you, because they will finalize today's H2 talk. Sarah.
Thank you very much. And I think what has been discussed is very relevant. That who's actually in the best position to take the first step to de-risk the whole value chain, because there's no point building the infrastructure if there's not demand, and no point building supply if the demand isn't there. On the other hand, you need that missing link between the supply and offtake. And I think what Uffe has just explained is a very important perspective. One thing that has not yet perhaps discussed in this discussion or raised in this discussion is that we have fundamental differences between the different regions in Europe. So we have some regions that are really demand heavy, have a high expectation of getting hydrogen delivered to the industries there. And then we have other regions with competitive electricity prices, potential for producing green or clean hydrogen in those regions. And we need the cross-border infrastructure to create that market and connect the supply and demand. But in addition to that, we have transit countries, or countries that are more in balance with their supply and offtake. And what is their incentive to develop infrastructure that will actually support the decarbonization of other countries? Of course, there needs to be a business case for those countries and those companies as well. And I think we have discussed today ITCA model and amortization account and different funding tools for the demand side and de-risking of the projects and the whole value chain. But this is, in my opinion, a European level question that a single member state cannot answer. And I think that the important thing is that we would create a model or a target for the hydrogen infrastructure and overall energy infrastructure that supports the goals of decarbonizing Europe. And for example, if I think about Finland, our country, the company that I'm representing, we have a significant potential for producing hydrogen, but we are, as a member state, relatively small. We don't have the same, perhaps, capabilities of funding or de-risking infrastructure. And that's why I think in order to build out energy infrastructure, and with energy infrastructure now I mean also the generation side, there needs to be mechanisms in place that support this build out for those countries as well. And that's actually in the benefit of Europe. So that then we can produce energy where it is cheapest and connect the countries, but also create that business case for the transit countries. Everybody has to have some skin in the game, but in addition to that, I think some benefits from this. So from that perspective, I think the clear sort of request is that we ensure that funding tools like CEF stay in place. We don't know, I guess, yet what will happen in the next multi-annual framework. Hope that it stays there, that there's a significant contribution also for hydrogen and perhaps all of these energy vectors. I don't know if the right solution is to earmark that, but that hydrogen stays on the agenda, both for the study phases of the projects, but also for the CapEx phase. And that's important to de-risk the projects since there is a question on the market ramp up and the phase, but then also this overall European target infrastructure model for hydrogen and perhaps then the ITCA or a similar model. So I think that's sort of the clear points from the infrastructure side perspective. And maybe as a final remark, the demand and the mandates are of course the most important things to get things going. But I think the second step where you can support this transition is actually de-risking the middle part so that the other investments are in the value chains are enabled. Thanks.
Excellent. Many thanks, Sara. Many thanks for that. Let us now turn to Bert. You can comment on everything, but we also have a dedicated question to you by Noah van Hulst. Is the EIB open to help finance infrastructure for hydrogen imports into the Northwest European hydrogen market? This is dedicated to you, Bert. I'm sure you can say something.
I can say something, but it's not necessarily the truth if I don't have a talk to my colleagues. But basically, there's no, and quite obviously, if we're looking at the south, we're also looking at the north. But also, as Philippe was mentioning, is not all lines will necessarily make the most sense. So we will have to judge that. What's very important, if you look at all the offtake and production, is what kind of capacity utilization are we going to look at for these pipelines? Because we all want to have kind of like huge capacities for the future, but of course the costs for higher capacity are also there to be taken care of. So yes, we're open for everything, but it all has to make economic sense with, of course, the support mechanisms that need to be included, which we're discussing, of course, with the Commission and with the various member states organizations. So yes, we're open for business, but all under certain circumstances, and offtake and supply will be very key for that.
Excellent. A clear answer. Dutch answer. Very good. But I like it very much. Now, Anka, you've heard all these requests. So what will happen to CEF, Connecting Europe facility? What will happen to hydrogen in general in the multi-annual financial framework, MFF? There is a last comment in our chat by Victor. I interpret it as still there is a prioritization on electricity. How can you bridge the gap if you don't basically treat hydrogen equally? So what's your final assessment, Anka?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jorgo. It's really a pleasure to follow all the discussions and to somehow have the last word, being able to pick on the topics I want to comment on. So I would start with the question on the CEF. Of course, as the unit dealing with CEF in the Commission, I very much hope there will be a CEF, but we cannot anticipate the proposals of the Commission for the next MFF. So I cannot comment on that. What I can say is that for sure hydrogen will remain a priority at the same level of prioritization as the other types of infrastructure that we have under the 10-year regulation, as it currently is. I very much like also your 3.5 model, what you mentioned, although CO2 might become truly fourth element in there with the new CO2 package next year, because we very much argue in favor of integrated planning to make sure that we have an optimized planning of our energy grids, making the best out of all energy carriers. This is still not in place. has been a requirement since 2013. It's now part of the gases package as well, but we hope that going forward we will be looking at a true integrated planning of energy infrastructure in the EU. And maybe a last word on financing. Of course, we see it as well, and it's a bit disappointing to see that even though we've added for quite 3 years now already hydrogen in the 10-year regulation as one of the infrastructure priorities that the EU is supporting, and also under the TENI policy, we don't see a lot of FIDs. Actually, not any FIDs for these projects that are already on the PCI list. And of course, this is something that we realize is an issue. There's an issue in matching demand with supply and with the infrastructure and putting them all together. There are already some mechanisms to deal with it. As you know, in the Commission, we have these political high-level groups where at a regional level, we discuss with member states, and we also have the possibility to discuss with stakeholders, and we consider that these would be interesting avenues to put together on a regional basis demand supply with the infrastructure. So far, these political high-level groups have been very successful in the implementation of energy infrastructure, especially difficult, even political or geopolitical projects. So we hope to translate this expertise also to hydrogen. For example, now on the 12th of May, Poland, the Polish presidency is holding a ministerial of the Baltic Energy Market Interconnection Plan high-level group, the so-called BEMIP high-level group, where we hope to be able to sign a new memorandum of understanding of the BEMIP high-level group, really enshrining in there the cooperation also on hydrogen. And within this group, already at the working level, we've been conducting a study on the hydrogen potential for the region linked to possibilities for infrastructure development and refurbishment. And we've been doing similar studies also in the south west and also in the Central Eastern European region. So we're doing this at the regional level. It's being now started for the North Sea in the ENSEC cooperation as well. So we see this as a new possibility, a new avenue. But we also want to tackle it in the European Grid Package, which has been announced in the Affordable Energy Action Plan. It is expected towards the end of this year, so Q4 2025. And we are looking into possible measures tackling hydrogen financing, in particularly during the ramp-up phase. It might be that these are non-legislative measures for the moment, but we will very soon publish the call for evidence and the public consultation for the package. So feel free all stakeholders to contribute to these documents in order for us to be able to properly shape the policy going forward. And perhaps I could stop here. Thank you.
Many thanks. And I understand this issue with FIDs, missing FIDs, absolutely. Commissioners come to me and say, hey, we delivered the regulatory framework now, Fit for 55, where are the FIDs? Now, where are the definitions? Where is the de-risking activities? Where is the implementation of RED III? So all these elements, and there's a gap between political understanding and theoretical understanding and real market. So we need to match this. And in order to get there, we created an alliance that leads me to the next slide, please. Just this week, on Monday, we created something which is called the Hydrogen Infrastructure Alliance. So the kickoff meeting took place April 14th, and it's an alliance of 18 Brussels-based organizations working together to put forward concrete proposals for advancing the hydrogen infrastructure to overcome, Anke, and you are absolutely right, I understand this. We also want to see FIDs, but to overcome this gap issue. So you see that in the green packages down there. So for Q2, there's work on the own initiative report in the European Parliament on electricity grids. Q4 this year, legislative proposal to accelerate permitting, also an important issue that has been touched upon a little bit today. Last quarter this year, the Industrial Decarbonization Accelerator Act. So basically Hydrogen Bank, but in bigger and possibly also interacting with other technologies. Also the port strategy and the grids package and the 10E review foreseen here. We also, next slide, I would like to highlight that there is an ACER. ACER is the monitoring authority for ENTSO-E, ENTSO-G, and now also NOH or NO. And there is a consultation out there, and you can see our response to that consultation on the intertemporal cost allocation mechanism here. So we heard from the German example. Other examples are also out there, and please have a look at this public consultation as well. And finally, leads me to the next slide. I would like to thank you and invite you already to our next upcoming H2 talk, tackling a similar issue, the important projects of common European interest that have been highlighted by Anka when in her initial presentation. We have some very, very interesting takeaways, very positive ones, some negative, and we would like to use this instrument to bring it also to more FIDs, and I think that's doable. We have a lot of money here in the game, but need to use it a little bit better. My last slide is to remind you that we have, of course, a Hydrogen Week. Next slide, please. That is 29th of September to 3rd of October. 4 commissioners have already confirmed that they will come and be at the Hydrogen Week, among which the first Executive Vice President, Teresa Ribera. And this is very, very good to discuss all these topics directly with the policymakers. I would like to thank you. We are a little bit over time today, but it was worth it. We got a lot of very valuable information. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks for the presentations. Thanks to the panel. See you next time. Bye-bye.